Hello, and welcome Lakewood Library patrons. My name is Linda Barbero, and my talk today is on reusing historic buildings and thinking about it in the way in which we think about recycling in general. I am currently a member of the Lakewood Historical Society's Board of Trustees. My education and background includes city planning, design, historic preservation, architecture, and teaching, including teaching architectural history and history at a living history museum. May is Historic Preservation Month, as you may know already. I will talk today about a green or more sustainable approach to addressing historic buildings and look at it as we look at recycling. As you know, recycling is about how to do three basic things: reduce, reuse, and recycle objects and materials, often packaging. A similar concept can be applied to historic buildings also. I will discuss how to reduce, reuse, and recycle in terms of historic buildings. In light of climate change, currently and going forward, considering these greener approaches are ideal. I am talking with you as fellow patrons and residents of the community to consider together how to work to maintain the integrity of our built environment, our history, and in turn, aspects of our quality of life. Utilizing green concepts can help make this possible and support our local economy at the same time. The first concept that I would like to talk about is that of reducing. This is a recycling concept. Historic buildings are all around us in Lakewood, as they are in many cities, on both our residential and commercial streets. It is possible to maintain and use our existing historic buildings whenever possible, rather than to demolish and build new ones instead. There is nothing wrong with well-designed new construction, but with such an abundance of older buildings, utilizing them first is the most sustainable route in terms of climate change, and also in terms of local history and character of our city. In the case of developing new construction, designing while acknowledging the context of the existing adjacent buildings, street, and neighborhood results in the most successful and appealing urban design in character with the street and community as a whole. When new residential or commercial buildings, whether freestanding or infill structures, are designed and developed in context with the existing building fabric, both the new and the older buildings gain viability together. Reducing or working with the building stock already existing in the city leads us to not only preserve them, retain the charm and history, and enhance the quality of life now and into the future for our children. The second recycling concept I will address is to reuse. Just as a container can be reused, a building can be too. Reusing a building is a green choice. I will discuss ways in which it is greener. First, reuse of a building uses the inherent energy within a building. Energy already put in to the fabrication of each building material and the combination of them put together into the building structure in its entirety. Reuse maximizes another green factor, that of taking advantage of prime locations within our city. So additional energy is not required to tie into existing infrastructure systems, such as water, sewer, and streets. Reuse eliminates the energy and cost of demolition or partial demolition of older buildings. Energy and cost of hauling debris to landfill as well as requiring less energy needed for manufacturing brand new materials, shipping those new materials, and putting them together in a new construction. Reuse involves rehabilitation and renovation of historic buildings, of which the costs are more in labor rather than in new materials. This has a big plus for a city. Investing in more local labor in turn supports the local economy, which boosts the social activities occurring in and around the neighborhoods. Reuse of buildings helps keep them vital, providing spaces for the functions of community living. Adapting to new uses or refreshing existing uses of buildings is especially critical for the successful retail and restaurant establishments which benefit by renewed business images every 5 to 10 years. Reuse of historic buildings can strengthen the image of a business, combining the assets of its prime location, its quality materials, and unique architectural detailing, resulting in higher property values overall for the city. When reused buildings offer to residents a combination of mixed uses, among them distributed across the commercial street, connections within neighborhoods are reinforced, as opposed to longer distances between commercial uses, which disconnects activities of the community. The more older buildings are reused, the less reason to drive further to shopping centers or to build more of them. Commercial districts with more variety of higher and lower end businesses provide more of something for everyone. Reuse must be ultimately, however, economically feasible in order for it to gain support of both the public and private sector. Historic tax credits are available and can be applied in reuse projects, providing a strong financial incentive to developers to reuse an historic building. Reuse also shortens the review process with the city for the developer and will potentially shorten the opposition or reduce the opposition to a project. The third portion of my topic today is the concept of recycling. Just as an object can be recycled, a material or a package can be recycled, so can a building. If an historic building will not be used for any reason, it can be recycled into components for other uses. A building's components or materials can be disassembled and recycled or salvaged to be reused or recycled into something new. Some examples of building materials that can be salvaged are stone, brick, structural elements such as beams or columns, windows, floorboards, ironwork, fixtures, hardware, to name some. They can be recycled and built into additions, other buildings, infill buildings, even other renovated older buildings. They can be built into landscaping structures or pavers or other uses. Recycling a building is not a first choice, as the original historic building and its built-in green energy will be lost. However, recycling elements of it will enable the historic building to live on. It will live on as a contributing factor in the character of a renovation or in the character of a newly constructed building. Today I have spoken about how we can look at ways to compare the reuse of historic buildings to the concept of recycling. Or in other words, ways to reduce, reuse, and recycle historic buildings. All three of these approaches help to keep a city vital, greener, and historic at the same time. To reduce, we can consider how to use the existing supply of older buildings and reduce the need for new construction. This applies to both residential buildings and commercial buildings. The emphasis is on utilizing what we have. This is the greenest aspect of this. The second tool, perhaps the most important tool, is reuse. It provides many benefits to a city, from preserving history, character, enhancing quality of life, and adding to tax assets for the city. There are an abundance of existing buildings, and at the same time, a myriad of opportunities to reuse them for current uses and new uses. The third tool is to recycle the components or materials whenever possible, when an historic building will not be reused, when it will not be saved, but demolished instead. This is the third and of course last resort to retain something an historic building may have to offer to the environment in the form of living on in a renovation or new construction as a recycled component. Advocating and working toward a sustainable use for our older buildings is the greenest and often most affordable route, which at the same time keeps our sense of local history alive right now and into the future. I often think of Jim Barbero, a former planning director of Lakewood, who often says and still says, Lakewood is the biggest small town he knows. I agree, he still says that, and that is part of Lakewood's appeal. We can be a part of how Lakewood retains its sense of place. It's a small town charm and feel that can be retained. We can adapt to change, including climate change, with green approaches to keep our historic, residential, and commercial building stock economically viable and environmentally sustainable. I have enjoyed talking with you and look forward to seeing you out in the neighborhood. Thank you.